My sister Lexie called just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. She never called this early unless something was wrong, especially not from the cockpit. "Riley," she said without preamble, "is Noah home with you right now?" I looked through the archway into the living room, where my husband sat reading the Wall Street Journal in his favorite navy robe. "Yes," I replied slowly, watching him sip from the mug I'd bought him last Christmas, the one that read "World's Okayest Husband." Before I continue narrating the story of Riley, please consider giving this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Lexie didn't respond right away, and the silence hummed between us like static. Then, her voice dropped to a whisper so low I barely caught it over the radio chatter in the background. "That's not possible. I just watched him board my flight to Paris. He's in business class, holding hands with a woman in a red dress." My mouth went dry, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Behind me, I heard Noah laugh softly at something he was reading. He looked up and smiled at me, completely unaware that the world had just cracked open beneath my feet. "I'm making eggs. Want some?" I asked, my voice higher than usual, trembling on the edge of hysteria. He nodded cheerfully, rising to grab a second mug for himself. "Sure, love. You're the best." I turned my back to him, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "Lexie, are you absolutely sure it's him?" I whispered. "Riley, I'm staring right at him," she said. "He's wearing that gray cashmere blazer you said he bought in Milan last fall. He's laughing like he doesn't have a care in the world." I stared at Noah's back as he moved to the sink, every movement familiar, every detail wrong. I couldn't think. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the countertop while my husband poured himself coffee 10 feet away and apparently boarded a plane across the ocean. "Send me a picture," I said quietly into the phone. "Already did. Check your messages." The photo came through seconds later, and I stared at it with wide, unblinking eyes. There he was. Same jawline, same perfectly styled chestnut hair, same wedding band on the left hand now resting casually on the armrest. The woman beside him had her head tilted toward his shoulder, a glossy magazine open on her lap. His smile was effortless, affectionate, like the version of him I hadn't seen in months. It made me feel physically ill. "Lexie," I said, barely able to speak around the lump in my throat. "I don't know what's going on, but something's really, really wrong." Her voice was steady, clipped, all business now. "I'll try to get a few more photos when the cabin lights go down. I'll text when we land." And then she was gone, the line going dead just as Noah walked back toward the table. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting down the steaming mug in front of me. I nodded numbly, trying to act like I hadn't just seen him on a plane to Paris. "Yeah, that was Lexie, just checking in before takeoff." He grinned, settling into the chair across from me. "She really loves being a pilot, doesn't she?" I tried to match his smile but felt the corners of my mouth twitch uncontrollably. Noah had always been a creature of habit. Eggs over medium, black coffee, morning news, gym at 10 sharp. He leaned back and folded his newspaper, humming a soft tune under his breath, a song we'd danced to at our wedding, which now felt like some grotesque joke. My stomach churned violently. I excused myself and walked calmly to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Once inside, I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. Noah, my Noah, was in my house. But he was also in the sky, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, with another woman. One of these versions of him had to be a lie. I stared at myself in the mirror, my reflection pale and unfamiliar. At 36, I'd built a life I thought was solid, rooted, unshakable. We had our little house in Boston, a golden retriever named June, weekend getaways to Vermont. But all of it suddenly felt like a stage set built for someone else's story. And I was the fool standing center stage, unaware that the curtains were already falling. I picked up my phone again, fingers shaking as I zoomed into the photo Lexie had sent. There was no doubt in my mind. That was my husband. But how? Was it a twin I didn't know about? Some elaborate prank? The more I stared, the more the dread solidified into something sharp. Back at the breakfast table, Noah scrolled through his emails as if nothing had happened. He looked up when I returned, raising an eyebrow. "You sure everything's okay? You were in there a while." "Just a headache," I murmured, avoiding his eyes. He stood and kissed my temple. "You work too hard. You need a break." The scent of his cologne hit me as he leaned in, and I realized it was different, lighter, citrusy. Not the earthy sandalwood he'd worn for years. I blinked, disoriented. When had he changed it? Meal. Why hadn't I noticed? Ayan. Noah left for the gym at exactly 9:58 a.m., same as always. I watched from the window as he jogged down the sidewalk, gym bag slung over one shoulder. He waved at the elderly neighbor, patted June's head through the gate, and disappeared around the corner. The perfect husband, on the surface. A mask that fits so well, I hadn't seen the cracks. The moment he turned the corner, I moved. I raced to his home office, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. His laptop sat open, desktop cluttered with spreadsheets and emails. I knew his password, our anniversary date, a detail he claimed he could never forget. I typed it in and was met with an error message. Password incorrect. I tried again, slower this time, still wrong. My palms began to sweat as I tried his mother's birthday, June's name, his favorite football team. Nothing worked. This wasn't like him. Noah had always been transparent about tech stuff, even letting me log in for him when he traveled. Why had he changed it? What was he hiding? And more importantly, why now? I opened the drawer to his desk, rifling through files until I found a leather-bound planner. Inside were neat rows of appointments, work trips, meetings, birthdays. Except one page was torn out, April 19th through the 23rd. This week. I checked the date again to be sure. Today was April 21st. I snapped a photo of the planner with my phone, then shut everything quickly and quietly. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I was sure now that something was very, very wrong. The man in my house was wearing Noah's face, his voice, his routines, but someone else was wearing his blazer on a plane bound for Paris. And I was going to find out why. I spent the rest of the morning pacing through the house, waiting for Lexie to land. The minutes dragged like hours, each one stretching my nerves thinner. June followed me from room to room, sensing something was off, her golden tail low and ears twitching. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything but that photo of Noah, my Noah, with another woman. I had no answers, only questions that multiplied every time I blinked. When Lexie finally texted, I snatched up my phone like a lifeline. Landed. Hotel shuttle. We'll call you in 10. It's worse than I thought. Her message sent chills down my spine, and I stared at it like it might morph into something more comforting. 10 minutes felt like a lifetime, but I kept staring at the screen, fingers clenched so tightly they hurt. Finally, it rang. "Hey," she said, her voice low. "I got more pictures, Riley." He kissed her forehead while she slept. They ordered champagne, giggled like newlyweds, and then he called her mon amour. My throat closed up, and I had to turn away from the window before I screamed. Lexie continued. I tried to get audio, but the engines made it hard. Still, I've got enough. I took the phone into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. June scratched once, but then wandered off, thankfully giving me space. Lexie sent a folder of images, one after the other. Noah holding hands with the woman, Noah reclining with his eyes closed, Noah eating off her plate. The intimacy between them was unmistakable, the kind of closeness that spoke of history, not spontaneity. I didn't recognize the woman, but that didn't make it better. Her hair was auburn, sleek and straight, with a fringe that brushed her eyebrows. She wore a gold bracelet on her right wrist, the same Cartier design Noah had once admired in a boutique in New York. He'd said it would be perfect for someone refined but low maintenance. And I'd laughed, not knowing that memory would curdle one day. There it was, gleaming on another woman's arm, while my husband leaned in and whispered things only she could hear. My chest ached with every image. "Are you sure it's him?" I asked again, desperate for some alternate truth. Lexie sighed on the other end, patient but firm. "Riley, I've known Noah for over a decade. I could pick that smirk out of a crowd in pitch darkness. I swear to you, it's him. But he's here, I whispered, hating how fragile I sounded. I watched him pour coffee, joke about my pancakes, read the market section. Lexie didn't respond for a moment, then said, "Do you remember that movie we watched as kids? The one where the husband had a secret twin?" I laughed once, short and bitter. "That's not real life, Lex." "No," she said carefully. "But deepfakes are. And impersonators. You said something about his cologne changing?" "Yes, and his laptop password is wrong now." There was a pause. Then Lexie added, "Riley, you need to assume you're being lied to. Start gathering evidence." Her words hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about uncovering a carefully constructed illusion. Noah hadn't just cheated. He was orchestrating something deeper, more elaborate, and I was the last to know. My instincts kicked in, the ones that had helped me catch discrepancies in vendor records and inflated project expenses at work. "I'm going to his office," I told Lexie, my voice harder now. "His gym session lasts an hour. That gives me 30 minutes tops." Lexie's tone shifted to match mine. Steel over concern. "Text me when you're inside. I'll be up for another hour. I don't want you doing this alone." I grabbed a notepad, gloves, and my old flash drive from the back of the junk drawer. Every step toward Noah's study felt like trespassing in my own home. The bookshelf door was slightly ajar, and I noted the angle before nudging it open. His desk, always too neat, looked staged rather than used. The mousepad had no dust pattern, and his pen sat perfectly aligned with the edge of the planner. I started with the drawers, top to bottom, right to left, methodical and swift. Receipts for restaurants we'd never been to, brochures from overseas hotels, and a jewelry catalog dog-eared on a page with engagement rings. We were already married, and I hadn't received anything new in months. I photographed everything and kept going, scanning paper trails like a bloodhound. Nothing screamed gotcha, but together the pieces hummed with betrayal. The bottom drawer was locked, and that's when I knew the real secrets were inside. Noah never locked anything. He was careless in the way of men who assumed no one would question them. I pulled out a bobby pin from my bun and knelt beside the drawer, heart hammering as I twisted. 2 minutes in, I heard the faint click, and the drawer rolled open with a low creak. Inside was a manila folder with a name scribbled in black marker, Valerie Marin. I didn't recognize it at first, but the contents made it crystal clear. Photos of the woman on the plane, printouts of emails between her and Noah, or someone claiming to be him, discussing travel plans, shared apartments, and something about finalizing the move. There was also a lease agreement for a flat in Paris, both their names listed as tenants, signed just 2 weeks ago. I copied every document onto my flash drive, fingers flying. I felt like I was robbing a bank, even though it was my own life I was stealing back. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, making me jump and drop the drive onto the floor. June barked, loud and frantic, which meant it wasn't a package or a neighbor. My blood froze. I pressed my body against the wall, peeking through the blinds at the front door. There, standing with a bouquet of white lilies, was Noah, or the man who looked like him. He was early, 20 minutes too early. Something was wrong. I crept out of the office and shut the door silently behind me. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it through the walls. I plastered a smile on my face and opened the door like nothing was out of place. "Surprise?" he said, holding up the bouquet. "For my girl, just because." I took the bouquet from him slowly, careful not to let my expression betray the alarm bell screaming in my head. White lilies. My least favorite flower, something he should have remembered after I called them funeral blooms on our 3rd date. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice steady as I stepped aside to let him in. June didn't wag her tail like usual, only stood stiff and alert near the hallway, her eyes locked on him. "She okay?" he asked with a laugh, ruffling her ears despite her clear discomfort. "She's just thrown off by the doorbell," I said, watching his every move. He wandered into the kitchen, setting his gym bag on the counter like he'd done 100 times before. But now I noticed the small details I'd missed before. The slightly different gait, The subtle stiffness in his right shoulder, the way he opened the fridge with his left hand instead of his right. Noah was right-handed, always had been. This man mimicked him almost perfectly, but not perfectly enough. "I figured we'd make lunch together," he said, pulling out sandwich ingredients like nothing was wrong. I nodded, placing the lilies in a vase just to buy time, watching the reflection of his movements in the glass. "I'll toast the bread," I offered, careful not to sound too quiet or too enthusiastic. My mind raced, flipping through possibilities like flashcards in a test I hadn't studied for. Whoever this was, he didn't know I'd seen the lease agreement or the emails. "Did you get a good workout in?" I asked, aiming for casual. He grinned. "Yeah, new trainer actually. Eli pushed me hard." I froze just for a second. Noah had hated trainers. He used to call them glorified cheerleaders. "That's great," I said, sliding 2 slices of bread into the toaster. I glanced at the clock, only 12:17 p.m., still early enough to come up with a plan. If he was impersonating Noah, he might not have access to all his memories. I needed a way to test that without raising suspicion. "Do you remember the name of that jazz bar we went to for our first anniversary?" He looked up from the deli meat, his eyes narrowing slightly. Blue Room. He chuckled, masking his error. "Well, I was close." He wasn't. The real Noah would have answered without hesitation. The Velvet Note, tucked behind a bookstore in Cambridge, with the saxophonist who played Summertime while I cried into my wine. The man standing in my kitchen didn't know that. He didn't know that I kept the napkin from that night in a photo album upstairs. He didn't know me at all. I texted Lexie under the counter, the message short and urgent. "He's here. He's not Noah. Call me in 10, and pretend it's an emergency." She responded instantly with a thumbs up, and I slid the phone back into my sweater pocket. He handed me a sandwich on a plate, smiling like we were a couple with nothing to hide. "Extra mustard, just how you like it." I forced a bite, chewing mechanically, my eyes watching his every move. He ate too, normal speed, relaxed posture. But something about him felt like watching a play. Every laugh, every glance, every gesture felt timed and rehearsed. Even the way he brushed crumbs off the counter seemed too deliberate. June lay under the table, still staring at him with distrust. Lexie's call came at exactly 12:28, and I answered it like I hadn't been waiting. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Her voice came through, breathless and anxious. "Riley, I'm so sorry. I need you at Mom's place. It's bad." I widened my eyes for show, turning toward the stranger. "What happened?" I asked, keeping the phone to my ear. Lexie, bless her, stayed in character. "She fell in the shower. I'm waiting for the ambulance, but I can't ride with her. Please come now." I nodded quickly, already standing. "I'm on my way." He stood too, brow furrowed with concern that looked almost genuine. "Do you want me to drive you?" I shook my head quickly. "No, it'll be faster if I go alone. I'll text you when I know more." He hesitated, then nodded. I grabbed my coat and keys, June's leash already in my hand. "I'll take her with me, in case I'm gone a while." He didn't argue, just watched us go, the smile on his face not quite reaching his eyes. As soon as the door shut behind me, I practically sprinted to the car. I didn't head toward my mother's. I drove straight to Lexie's condo. She opened the door in sweatpants and a hoodie, her face tense. "You okay?" she asked, pulling me into a tight hug. "No," I said, voice shaking. "It's not him. It's not Noah. He failed every test I gave him." We sat in her kitchen while I laid out everything. The planner, the lease, the emails, the sandwich, the fake memory about the jazz bar. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing grimmer with every detail. "I don't think he's just cheating," I finished, pushing my tea away. I think he's being replaced. I think I'm living with someone who's not my husband." Lexie leaned back and crossed her arms, her pilot instincts fully activated. "This isn't just an affair. This is identity theft on a level I've never seen." I nodded slowly, remembering how he hesitated before answering about the jazz bar. "How do we prove it?" I asked. "Before it's too late?" She stood, went to her bedroom, and returned with a slim black case. Inside was a tablet and a tiny flash drive. "You remember my friend Elise from flight school? She went into aviation cybersecurity." Lexie plugged the drive into the tablet and said, "You're about to meet her." Then she added, "And trust me, she lives for this kind of mess." Lexie tapped the screen a few times, and a video call window opened, revealing a woman with sharp cheekbones, short, silver-dyed hair, and an expression that could freeze lava. "Elise, meet my sister Riley," Lexie said. "She's in a complicated situation." Elise didn't blink, only leaned closer to the camera and said, "Start talking." I recapped everything. Noah's impossible presence in 2 places, the photos from the plane, the wrong cologne, the password changes, and the drawer full of lies. By the end, Elise was already taking notes with a stylus. "You're not crazy," she said bluntly, which I didn't know I needed until I heard it. "This has all the hallmarks of an orchestrated identity operation. Whoever is impersonating your husband has tech-level backing." "Tech level?" I asked, though my gut already knew what she meant. "I mean, this isn't some guy in a wig. It's deep impersonation, likely enhanced with AI mimicry or surgical alterations." June whimpered softly at my feet, her tail tapping lightly against the floor. Elise leaned back, muttering to herself as she opened another app on her screen. "What I need is a live audio sample," she said. "Do you have anything recent from the man in your house? Voice memos, voicemails, anything like that?" I pulled out my phone and opened my voice recorder app. "This was from breakfast this morning," I said, handing the phone to Lexie, who played the file on speaker. The imposter's voice echoed in the room. "Extra mustard, just how you like it?" Elise closed her eyes, then opened them sharply. "That's not a natural vocal pattern. There are artificial inflections, like someone using vocal software to maintain consistency." My stomach turned again. "So you're saying this is tech-assisted?" Lexie asked, her voice tight. "I'm saying someone invested a lot of money and effort into replacing Riley's husband convincingly." Elise's fingers flew over her keyboard. "You said you found Elise in Paris?" "Yes, it was signed by Noah and a woman named Valerie Marin." I showed her the photo of the document I'd taken earlier. Elise paused for a beat, then whistled. "Found it. Registered under a shell company linked to a firm in Geneva, classic laundering route." She turned the screen toward us, showing a web of connections between fake companies and numbered accounts. "These people aren't amateurs. They're professionals, and your husband was either part of it or their target." "I need to know which one," I said, my voice brittle but determined. Elise nodded once. "Then we'll start digging." She sent an encrypted link to my email and instructed me to upload any files I'd copied from the office. "I'll trace what I can. You two lay low. Don't confront him yet, not unless you have to." I nodded, adrenaline giving me clarity I hadn't felt all day. Back at home, the lights were off when I arrived, and the house felt strangely colder. The imposter had left a note on the kitchen counter in Noah's handwriting. "Went for a run. Be back by 4. June sniffed the note and growled softly, as if paper itself could be a liar. I gave her a treat and sat down at the dining table, pulling out my laptop. I uploaded everything Elise had asked for and added a note. "Find out who Valerie is. I think she's the key." At exactly 4:03, the door opened, and he walked in, sweaty and smiling. "Hey, babe, your mom okay?" I smiled back, forcing it to reach my eyes. Yeah, it was a false alarm. She slipped but didn't fall. Lexie stayed with her while I came home. He kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. "How about we do dinner in tonight?" he asked, already headed to the fridge. "Sure," I said, watching his movements like a scientist watching a specimen. Every step he took was confident, but just slightly off. The real Noah always tapped the fridge door shut with his elbow. This one used his foot. "I'll shower first," he said, heading toward the master bathroom. The moment the door closed, I darted to his gym bag. Inside, I found a prepaid phone tucked beneath a towel. Noah didn't believe in burner phones. He once called them paranoia in plastic. This one had only 2 numbers in the call log, one listed as V and one unlisted. I took a photo of the call log and stuffed the phone back into the pocket. Elise needed to see this. I returned to the kitchen just as the shower started, heart pounding with every step. It felt like playing house with a ghost who hadn't figured out he was dead yet. June paced beside me, restless and uneasy. Elise called that night at 11:13 p.m., her voice sharp with urgency. "I found something. You're going to want to sit down." Lexie and I were on a 3-way call, both wide awake in our respective homes. "Valerie Marin doesn't exist. Not really." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She's a ghost identity," Elise explained. "Built off the death certificate of a 6-year-old girl from Ohio. Someone used that as a base to create a fake adult identity, complete with social media history, credit score, and passport." "How long has it been active?" Lexie asked. 6 years. "Which means this plan has been in motion a lot longer than any of us realized." I stared at the wall, trying to piece it all together. My marriage was 7 years old. Valerie's ghost life had started a year after Noah and I wed. Had he been planning this all along? Or was he lured in by something he couldn't resist? I also tracked down the IP address from the email Noah used to contact Valerie. Elise continued. "It's been bouncing through proxies, but the original ping came from a corporate building in downtown Boston, a law firm called Halberstam and Carrick. Noah had consulted with that firm for a client merger last year." My blood turned to ice. "So he used his work connections to set this up?" I asked. "Or they used him," Elise replied. "Either way, someone there is involved." Lexie's voice came through, low and steady. "We're going to have to go deeper." And just like that, the hole I was falling into got even darker. The next morning, I didn't sleep in. I couldn't. I kept going over Elise's words in my head. "This plan has been in motion longer than you think." June stayed glued to my side while I packed a small overnight bag, stuffing it with my laptop, a hard copy of the lease, my flash drive, and the burner phone from the gym bag. I left my wedding ring on the dresser, its band cold against my skin for the first time in 7 years. By 7 a.m., I was already driving to Lexie's. Lexie greeted me with coffee and silence. No small talk, just shared focus. She'd cleared her guest room and set up her second monitor on the dining table, cables snaking across the floor like veins. "I took the day off," she said simply. "We're going to crack this wide open." I nodded, grateful and terrified at once. We sat in front of the screen while Elise shared her findings. She'd connected Valerie Marin's bank account to several offshore wire transfers, all routed through Halberstam and Carrick. "There's one attorney who shows up in all of them," Elise said, pulling up a file. "Marshall Dean, senior partner, specializes in asset protection and international estates." Lexie let out a low whistle. "He's not just hiding money, he's moving it." "I found something else," Elise continued, pulling up a photo on the screen. It was grainy, taken from surveillance, but the image was unmistakable. Noah, my real Noah, sitting across from Valerie at an outdoor cafe in Montreal. They were holding hands, mid-laugh, a glass of wine between them. The timestamp read, 3 weeks ago. I leaned closer, gripping the edge of the desk. "He said he was in D.C. that weekend," I whispered. Lexie murmured, "He lied to your face. He's been lying for months, maybe longer." Elise spoke up again. "They were traveling together under aliases. I've traced flights to Tokyo, Zurich, and Buenos Aires." I felt like the room was spinning. "He's preparing to disappear," Elise said flatly. "That's what this is." "Disappear and take everything with him," I muttered. "Not if we beat him to it." Lexie added, her jaw tightening. Elise nodded once. "Then you need to act fast." "Because they're moving." "What do we do first?" I asked, steadying myself. "Get physical access to his office again," Elise said. "There's a locked drawer you didn't break into last time, behind the bookshelf." I saw it in the background of a photo you sent." I blinked, stunned she'd noticed something I hadn't. "It's probably where he keeps the passports, cash, real escape tools. We coordinated a plan. I'd go in at lunch when I knew he'd be at his co-working space, pretending to handle client portfolios. Lexie would stay in the car with June, ready for a quick exit if needed. Elise walked me through how to pick a deadbolt using a paper clip and a flathead screwdriver. I felt like I was preparing for a heist instead of reclaiming my life. But maybe, at this point, there wasn't much difference. Back at the house, I moved fast, adrenaline spiking. Everything looked the same. Cozy, safe, false. I went straight to the bookshelf, pulled aside 3 faux books, and found the panel Elise had described. The lock was old but solid, probably upgraded recently. With shaking hands, I began to pick it open. It took longer than I wanted, sweat pooling at the base of my neck as every tick of the clock felt too loud. Then finally, click. The panel creaked open, revealing a black fireproof lockbox and a canvas zippered pouch. Inside the pouch were passports, multiple ones, all with Noah's face, but different names. The lockbox held $40,000 in cash, 3 USB drives, and a loaded Glock. I sat back on my heels, stunned. Noah, my Noah, had planned for everything. There was even a note inside, written in his handwriting. Phase 2. Friday. Last transfer, no contact after. Friday was 3 days from now. I photographed everything and closed the drawer without taking a single item. Lexie honked once from outside, our agreed signal. I hurried out, bag zipped, heart pounding. Once in the car, I dumped the photos into her lap. "He's running. Friday's the day." She started driving before I'd even buckled my seatbelt. We showed everything to Elise on a secure call that afternoon. She was impressed, which I knew was rare. "Here's what you need to do," she said. "Trigger him early. Force his hand." Lexie tilted her head. "How?" "Schedule a meeting with Marshal Dean at Halberstam and Carrick. Pose as a curious spouse catching on. Drop hints that you know something's wrong, but not everything." I frowned. "Wouldn't that scare him off?" "Exactly. He'll either try to silence you or accelerate his exit. That's when you strike." Lexie glanced at me. "It's risky." "So is doing nothing," I said, already pulling up the law firm's site. Within minutes, I had a consultation booked under a fake name, Emily Rhodes, Wednesday at 9 a.m., 2 days before Noah's planned escape. "Elise, you said you traced his most recent account access," I asked. "Has he moved the final funds yet?" "Not yet, but he's circling the trigger." We spent that night building digital traps. Elise created a mirror of our joint bank account, a fake version filled with mock transactions that looked real but tracked every move. Lexie drafted a decoy email, pretending to be me asking questions about our prenup. We baited every hook with just enough truth to make the fish bite. All we had to do was wait. At 10:43 p.m., I got a message from Noah, or the imposter. It was short. "Going to bed early. Tomorrow's a big day." I stared at the words for a long time. June laid her head on my lap, her breathing calm while mine wasn't, and I realized something terrifying. I missed him, the real him, despite it all. Before I narrate what happens next, kindly let me know what city or country you're watching from and why you haven't subscribed yet. Wednesday came fast. The sky over Boston still gray when I walked into Halberstam and Carrick's marble lobby. I wore a tailored navy pantsuit, no jewelry except a gold wedding band I hadn't worn in days. It made me feel armored, like slipping into an old identity one last time. The receptionist smiled and directed me to the 18th floor, where Marshal Dean's office overlooked the harbor like a throne. I could feel the blood in my ears as I stepped inside. Dean stood when I entered, tall and lean, with eyes like wet granite. "Emily Rhodes?" he asked, extending a hand. I shook it firmly. "Yes. Thanks for fitting me in on short notice." He gestured to the chair across from his and took his seat with a lawyer's practiced grace. "What brings you in today?" he asked, pen poised above a leather-bound notepad. "My husband and I are separating." I lied smoothly. "He's moved a large portion of our assets recently, and I'm trying to understand my options before things get hostile." Dean nodded without looking up. "Are you aware of any offshore accounts?" Bingo. I kept my expression neutral. I suspected. He's been cagey lately. Dean jotted something down, glancing up only briefly. "Do you know the name of the account manager he worked with?" "I believe it was someone in Zurich, possibly through his shell company, Mariscope Holdings." He froze for just a heartbeat. That pause told me everything I needed. Then he recovered, scribbling a note and flipping to a new page. "I'll need time to look into it. We offer a discovery service, of course. Discreet, highly effective." I smiled thinly. Discretion is exactly what I need. He talked for 10 more minutes, describing the firm's asset tracking process and legal strategies. I listened politely, filed it all away, and noted every name he mentioned. When I finally stood to leave, he offered a card and a firm handshake. "Let me know if your husband retains counsel," he said. "It's best we act before he tries to outmaneuver you." I nodded, walking out as calmly as I could. But my hands didn't stop trembling until I was in the elevator. I texted Lexie immediately. "Dean flinched at Mariscope. He's in this." She responded seconds later. "Elise just flagged a $750,000 wire out of the Cayman account. Timestamp, 9:14 a.m. The same moment, I said the shell company aloud. I drove straight to Lexie's condo, needing to be surrounded by people who weren't lying to my face. June bounded to the door to greet me, tail wagging in a nervous rhythm. Lexie opened the door, holding 2 mugs of coffee, like a scene we'd played out since college. "Tell me everything," she said as I kicked off my heels. And I did. Every pause, every glance, every line Dean fed me. "He's definitely involved." I finished, and he took the bait. Lexie leaned back on the couch, one leg tucked under her. "Then we're right on schedule." Elise appeared on the tablet, voice clipped and focused. "The last wire went through. They'll want to disappear by Friday. We need to move tomorrow." "Are we calling the feds yet?" I asked. "Almost," Elise said. "But first, we trigger the final failsafe." She pulled up a new file labeled Scenario D, Paris Switch, and shared her screen. I cloned Valerie's passport and booked 2 business-class tickets under her name and Noah's alias. Lexie raised an eyebrow. "To Paris?" "To bait them," Elise replied. "You need to discover the itinerary and confront him with it." I exhaled slowly. "Make him panic. Force his hand." Elise nodded. "And while he bolts, the FBI will be watching." That night, I printed the tickets and slid them into an envelope marked with a fake hotel logo. I left it in the living room on purpose, tucked just enough into a book to look hidden but findable. Then I waited. Noah, or the man wearing him, came home at 8:12 p.m., kissed my cheek, and poured himself a drink. I watched from the kitchen as he wandered toward the bookshelf. He saw it. I saw him see it. He reached for the book slowly, carefully, like a man checking for landmines. When he pulled out the envelope, I turned away before he caught me watching. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Then I heard it. The sharp snap of paper, followed by silence so thick I could taste it. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and forced. "Did you see these?" I turned, feigning surprise. "What is that?" "Tickets," he said. "To Paris." I walked toward him, letting my heart hammer in my chest. "Why would we go to Paris? We never booked anything." His jaw clenched. "Maybe it's a mistake. Someone playing a prank." "On both of us?" I asked, voice rising just slightly. He folded the papers with care, too much care. Then he smiled, and it was wrong, tight and rehearsed. "Don't worry about it. I'll call the airline." I stared at him for a long moment, letting silence do the work. Then I nodded once and said, "All right." At 2:37 a.m., I woke to the sound of soft footsteps. I stayed still, pretending to sleep, but my phone was already recording under my pillow. He moved around the house quietly, gathering things from drawers and closets. 30 minutes later, the front door clicked shut. I gave it 5 more, then slipped out of bed. June followed me to the window, her ears perked in alert. Down on the street, I saw him get into a Blacktown car. He didn't look back. I texted Lexie, "He's leaving early." "This is it," she responded instantly. Elise already pinged the license plate. "FBI's inbound." We were out of time. I grabbed my laptop, every file I'd saved, every recording, every photo. June hopped into the back seat of Lexie's car as we sped toward Elise's secure location just outside the city. By the time we arrived, Elise was already on the phone with her federal contact. I stood in the doorway, shaking, exhausted but ready. "You did it," Elise said, hanging up. "He took the bait. Now the real chase begins." Lexie poured me a glass of water, setting it down in front of me with her usual quiet calm. "What happens now?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elise looked me dead in the eye. "Now we bring him down." By Thursday morning, the FBI had full access to Elise's intel and the files I'd gathered from Noah's office. They confirmed what we already knew: multiple aliases, fake passports, offshore accounts, and a network of shell companies connected through Marshall Dean. Everything pointed to a premeditated plan to vanish, with nearly $2 million, a forged identity, and a ghost named Valerie Marin. Agent Lisa Moreno was assigned as lead, and when she joined our secure call that morning, she didn't mince words. "You've been living in a honey trap, Mrs. Bryant, but the trap is his now." Agent Moreno laid out their timeline. Intercept at Logan Airport or JFK, depending on which way he routed. Interpol was already on alert for Valerie's false passport, flagged from Elise's dummy booking. "Whatever his escape plan is," Moreno said, "he won't be alone. We believe the real Noah Bryant is traveling with him." My breath caught, and Lexie stiffened beside me. "The real Noah?" I asked slowly, though the words tasted like poison. "He's alive, tracked through facial recognition in Montreal, Zurich, and now Barcelona. We believe he's been working with Valerie to stage his own disappearance while using a double to maintain his professional and personal life." My heart twisted, hard and sharp, as the realization hit me. He hadn't been replaced, he had replaced himself. "I need confirmation," I said, gripping the edge of the table. Elise nodded grimly, pulling up a file. The video was clear. Noah, my Noah, laughing with Valerie as they exited a hotel in Spain. His posture, voice, movements, they weren't copied or faked. They were him, unburdened and free in a life that didn't include me. Lexie's hand slid onto my arm, grounding me. June lay under the table, her chin resting on my foot, unmoving. I watched Noah's smile flicker on the screen, a version of him I hadn't seen in years, carefree, unfiltered, untouched by the life we'd built together. The betrayal settled deeper than rage. It sank into the spaces where love had lived. "I need to be the one who ends this," I said. Agent Moreno agreed, outlining a plan that involved a recorded phone call and a traceable digital trail. "You'll message him," she explained. "Say you found something, documents, a recording, anything that implicates him. He'll try to contact you. He'll panic. That's when we move." I stared at my phone, unsure if my fingers could even type. But I did it. The message was short and laced with calm dread. "Noah, we need to talk. I found something you didn't want me to see." It was vague enough to bait him, yet specific enough to make him wonder which version of the truth I'd uncovered. He replied in under 6 minutes. "Riley, please don't do anything until we talk. I can explain." I showed the text to Lexie without saying a word. Elise set the software to record the call. When the phone rang, I took a breath and answered on speaker. "Noah," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Riley," he breathed. "It's really me. The real me." I swallowed hard. "Is that supposed to make it better?" "I didn't mean for this to happen this way," he said, and the sound of his voice nearly broke me. "I wanted a clean break, a new start. I didn't know how to leave you." "So you hired someone to pretend to be you? While you stole our life?" Silence. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. But I was drowning, Riley. Our life, it was too heavy. You were too good. And I didn't know how to measure up anymore. You could have told me, I whispered. You could have left. I needed the money. His voice cracked like he was the victim. I needed Valerie. She understands the world I want to live in. And what world is that? I asked. One where you commit wire fraud and disappear into fake identities. You don't understand, he said, sounding genuinely frustrated. You always wanted the version of me that fit into your clean, ordered life. The same life we'd built together, now labeled a cage. Agent Moreno signaled silently. They'd pinpointed his GPS. He was in transit, likely en route to a private jet terminal near JFK. I'm sorry, he said again, though it sounded rehearsed. I'll send you money once we're safe. You deserve that. I didn't respond. I just hung up. Elise, I said, already standing. Tell me he didn't get on the plane yet. He didn't, she confirmed. They're still at the car service depot. FBI units are in position. Lexie exhaled audibly, then turned to me. You sure you want to watch this go down? Yes, I said. I need to see it. Elise mirrored a live stream from the terminal's surveillance cameras. Noah and Valerie emerged from the Blacktown car, both wearing sunglasses and carrying matching leather luggage. Valerie clung to his arm, their pace unhurried like they'd already won. But the moment they stepped onto the tarmac, the scene changed. FBI agents swarmed from two unmarked vans. Valerie froze first, trying to bolt, but was tackled by a female agent with terrifying efficiency. Noah ran, because of course he did. He made it about 10 yards before he was tackled so hard the camera jolted. His sunglasses flew, revealing the same eyes that once promised me forever. And just like that, it was over. The room was quiet, except for June's steady breathing. Lexie leaned forward, elbows on knees, processing everything like a final approach checklist. Elise sat back and exhaled, fingers still hovering over her keyboard. I pressed one palm to my chest, as if to verify my own heartbeat. I didn't imagine it, I whispered. He really tried to vanish. He failed, Lexie said, voice low and clear. You didn't just survive this, you stopped it. I nodded, not quite believing it yet. There would be interviews, evidence reviews, likely a grand jury, but the worst part was done. Agent Moreno called 30 minutes later to confirm both suspects were in federal custody. Charges would include fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and identity theft. They'd already started the extradition process for Valerie's European crimes. Noah had lawyered up, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. Even his attorney had reportedly said, "You planned this too well. That's your problem." I spent that night on Lexie's couch, June curled at my feet like a silent guard. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional sound of Lexie refilling tea. We didn't speak much. Sometimes silence says everything. But before I fell asleep, Lexie whispered, "He tried to disappear, Riley, and you made the world see him." The morning after Noah's arrest, I woke to sunlight bleeding through Lexie's curtains and the soft weight of June pressed against my legs. For a moment, I forgot everything. Forgot the voice on the phone, the fake identities, the flight to nowhere. But memory returned with a dull throb, like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. I sat up slowly, my body stiff from the unfamiliar couch and the emotional weight that hadn't lifted overnight. Lexie handed me a mug of black coffee without a word. "Elise texted," she said, sitting beside me in sweatpants and a NASA hoodie. "Noah's being held without bail. Valerie's already trying to cut a deal." I blinked, still processing. What kind of deal? Probably to pin most of it on him. That tracks, I said, voice flat. She never seemed like the loyal type. Lexie sipped her coffee and gave me a look. "You sure you're okay?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I think I will be." Later that morning, Agent Moreno called with more updates. The charges were stacking up: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to defraud financial institutions, and obstruction of justice. They'd also found evidence that Valerie and Noah had planned a second phase, laundering money through a medical tech startup registered in the Caymans. It wasn't just about leaving me. It was about building a whole new empire together. Moreno's tone was calm, almost clinical, but I could hear the undercurrent of disgust. "You're a key witness, Mrs. Bryant," she said. "Your documentation was thorough and invaluable. I'm just glad I never deleted anything," I replied. "Compulsively backing up files finally paid off," Moreno chuckled dryly. "The IRS will be using your screenshots in their criminal audit." And Elise's digital trap led us straight to the Swiss accounts. For once, the system worked. Still, the fallout wasn't over. The press had already picked up the story. Boston banker and mistress caught in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. They didn't name me directly, but anyone who knew us could connect the dots. I turned off notifications on all my social media. I wasn't ready for the public sympathy or the thinly veiled pity. Lexie stayed close, shuttling between work and home to keep me company. She brought takeout, made me watch cheesy comedies, and took June on long walks when I couldn't get off the couch. I alternated between numbness and brief bursts of rage, like when I found the cufflinks I'd given Noah on our 5th anniversary hidden in his sock drawer, never worn again. Or when I remembered how he'd cried during our wedding vows. Was that real, or was he rehearsing even then? Ledijoy. One afternoon, Elise showed up in person for the first time. She walked in like she owned the building, dressed in black jeans, ankle boots, and a t-shirt that read, "Trust no one but your backup drive." She dropped a thick folder on the table in front of me and said, "Thought you might want this." Inside were printed transcripts, account freezes, recorded call logs, all the evidence that would be presented at Noah's trial. It felt like holding the obituary for a life I no longer recognized. "Trial date?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "Preliminary hearings in 2 weeks," Elise replied. "Full trial could take 6 months, maybe longer if Valerie flips." I nodded slowly. "I'll testify." Elise gave a rare smile. "Good. You're better on the record than half the agents I've worked with." After she left, I stared at the file for a long time, then slid it back into the envelope. I didn't need to read every word. I'd lived the story already. What I needed was closure, not more pages. Lexie found me that night staring at the ring box I hadn't thrown away yet. "You know," she said gently, "you don't have to keep it." "I know," I whispered. "But it's proof. That it happened, that I wasn't crazy." She nodded, understanding without pushing. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny gold charm. "Found this at the flea market. Thought it looked like you." It was a miniature compass. "You're not lost," she said simply. "You just changed direction." I clutched the charm in my fist and let the tears fall silently. Not for Noah, not even for Valerie. Just for the version of myself I had to leave behind. For the girl who believed a steady marriage was enough. For the woman who now knew better. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, postmarked from New York. Inside was a single sheet of paper and handwriting. I knew too well. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you get everything I couldn't give you." There was no signature. Only a pressed petal, once white, now faded brown. A lily. I didn't cry this time. I folded the letter and put it in the same box as the ring, sealing it shut. The next day, I drove to a local nonprofit that helped women escape financial abuse and offered to volunteer. They took one look at my resume and said, "We could use a fraud consultant." For the first time in weeks, I said yes without hesitation. The work was slow but fulfilling. I taught workshops on financial independence, ran training sessions on how to recognize red flags in joint accounts, and helped rewrite confidentiality protocols. I met women who'd lost more than I had, and women who fought like hell to reclaim themselves. One woman hugged me after I showed her how to lock down her credit report. "You're like a lighthouse," she said, "for people in fog." I wasn't ready to date again. I wasn't sure I ever would be. But I started walking June every morning. Just me in the quiet streets, breathing in clean air and thinking about what came next. The house I once shared with Noah was up for sale now, every trace of him scrubbed away like graffiti. Lexie helped me find a new place downtown, a one-bedroom condo with big windows and room for plants. The day I moved in, I stood in the kitchen surrounded by boxes, June curled up by the door. I unpacked the essentials first, mugs, plates, the compass charm from Lexie. Then I brewed tea and sat on the floor, sipping slowly as the sunlight slid across the tile. There was no more double life, just mine, finally real. The condo felt quiet at first, too quiet after months of chaos, deception, and near-constant surveillance. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned, like the stillness after a long, bitter storm. I painted the walls soft gray, replaced the overhead lights with warm-toned lamps, and filled the bookshelves with things that were only mine. June claimed the corner by the window, her head always perched on the sill like a neighborhood watchdog. Lexie visited twice a week, always bringing coffee, snacks, and unsolicited plants. We kept a small corkboard in the kitchen titled Life After. On it were tiny victories. My first solo dinner out, the woman I helped open her own checking account, June learning how to high-five. Lexie added a photo of us at the courthouse on the day Noah's trial date was officially set. We were both in navy, arms crossed, staring straight ahead with steel in our eyes. "We look like women no one should mess with," she'd said, pinning it dead center. Elise stayed in touch too, though she returned to her usual mysterious schedule and her rotating list of impossible clients. She sent one last encrypted email with everything I needed to know: Noah's extradition process, Valerie's plea bargain terms, and how the international financial watchdog groups now had both of them on permanent blacklist status. Valerie had caved in 2 days after her arrest, trading information for a reduced sentence. Noah refused to speak, refused to testify, refused to admit what everyone already knew. He pled not guilty, of course. The day of the trial, I wore a black sheath dress and my mother's old trench coat, the one she wore to every parent-teacher conference when she wanted to look powerful. Lexie sat beside me in the gallery, heels crossed at the ankle, her pilot's pin tucked inside her blazer-like armor. June couldn't come, but I imagined her waiting by the window like she always did. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Noah, thinner, paler, but still unmistakably him. Our eyes met, and neither of us looked away. The prosecutors laid out everything: fake identities, laundered money, forged documents, digital impersonation, offshore transfers. I testified for 2 hours, clear and steady, walking the jury through every spreadsheet, every email, every inconsistency that started it all. I didn't cry, not when they asked me how long I'd suspected. Not even when they played the recording of his voice saying, "I needed Valerie. She understands the world I want to live in." After I stepped down, Noah's lawyer didn't cross-examine me. He just looked at his notes and said, "No questions." The defense rested without calling either Noah or Valerie to the stand. They had nothing left to argue. When the jury returned a verdict 2 days later, it took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Noah to 14 years in federal prison, no parole. Valerie received 6 after her cooperation was factored in. When the judge asked Noah if he wanted to speak, he stood, turned slightly toward me and said, "Tell June I'm sorry." The courtroom didn't react, but Lexie muttered under her breath, "She's a dog, you absolute idiot." After the sentencing, I didn't go out to dinner or pop champagne. I went home, ordered Thai food, and curled up with June on the couch while Lexie sipped whiskey in the armchair. It felt like closing a book I'd read too many times. The story was over, but I wasn't. I was just beginning something else entirely. Over the next few months, life built itself again in small, solid pieces. The nonprofit hired me full-time as a financial recovery specialist, and I helped dozens of women quietly reclaim their power. I testified in another fraud case, then 2 more, becoming something of an expert in schemes that used love as leverage. Some days, I felt strong. Other days, I still checked the locks twice. One morning in May, I came downstairs to find a manila envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a check for $27,000 and a note in Valerie's unmistakably elegant cursive. "You were never the fool he said you were. I was. I'm sorry." There was no return address, but the check was real, drawn from a restitution fund she'd set up after sentencing. I donated half to the nonprofit and used the rest to start a scholarship fund for women returning to college after domestic financial abuse. Lexie teared up when she saw the brochure. "You made something out of this garbage fire," she said, squeezing my hand. I shrugged. "You helped me. Elise helped me. June helped me. All I did was survive it." "No," Lexie replied. "You made it count." The final piece of closure came one summer evening, when I was walking June along the harbor. We passed a little jazz trio playing on a corner, and the saxophonist launched into a song that made me freeze. "Summertime." The same song from our first anniversary. The same one we'd danced to before I ever saw the lies coming. I didn't cry, but I did sit on the nearest bench, watching the sunlight bounce off the water like it had somewhere better to be. June rested her head on my knee, and I let the music fill the spaces that betrayal had carved hollow. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like memory being repurposed, turned into something new, something mine. For the first time, it didn't hurt. A couple weeks later, the scholarship launched. The first recipient was a single mother named Tasha, who had escaped her fiancé after discovering he'd drained her retirement account. She sent a photo of herself holding her acceptance letter, smiling so wide it made my throat close. Under the picture she wrote, "Thank you for seeing me before I could see myself." I pinned it to the corkboard beside the courthouse photo. The condo didn't feel temporary anymore. I'd added curtains, books, a wine rack, and a large rug June liked to roll on after her baths. Lexie joked that it looked like an anthropology ad curated by a woman who read court transcripts for fun. She wasn't wrong. It was quiet, grown-up, a little messy, and entirely mine. One night I hosted dinner for Lexie, Elise, and a few of the women I'd met through the nonprofit. We drank Prosecco and made pasta from scratch, flour coating the counters and our sleeves. June wore a ridiculous bow tie Lexie had bought and slept in the middle of the room like she owned the place. We laughed too loud and stayed up too late, trading stories that once would have made us cry. Now they made us feel like survivors. By midnight, the last guest had gone, and Lexie helped me load dishes into the sink. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, then paused. "Yeah, I think I really am," she smiled, brushing flour from my shoulder. "Told you, women like us don't stay broken." The following morning, I woke up with sore arms from rolling pasta dough and a full heart from something I couldn't quite name. Sunlight filtered through the linen curtains, and June was sprawled across the rug, snoring softly with her paws twitching. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and steady, and sat by the window with my notebook, the one I used for thoughts that didn't fit anywhere else. On the first blank page, I wrote, "This wasn't the ending. This was the correction, the moment the story bent back toward truth." I didn't think about Noah every day anymore, but when I did, it wasn't with fire in my chest. It was with cool observation, like studying a case file I'd already closed. He became a name in headlines, a cautionary tale, a man who mistook reinvention for freedom and betrayal for bravery. Valerie vanished from public view after her sentence began, and no more letters or checks followed. That was fine with me. I didn't need more apologies to move forward. The scholarship fund grew faster than I'd expected, boosted by anonymous donors Elise suspected were former clients who'd found their conscience. Lexie helped me create a small board, and we named the foundation Compass Women after the charm she gave me that night on her couch. We offered workshops, counseling, resume services, and when the budget allowed, emergency relocation stipends. Some women came in whispering, others arrived roaring. All of them left stronger than they came. My story spread quietly at first, mostly by word of mouth. Then one podcast featured it, an investigative series on white-collar crime that painted me as both victim and avenger. The response was overwhelming. Emails from strangers, survivor letters, invitations to speak. I declined the big interviews but accepted one for a community college panel. I wore a navy blouse and Lexie's pilot pin, and I told the truth. I was married to a man who wore two lives like tailored suits, I said, scanning the room. But I found myself in the wreckage. And I built something no one could fake. A few people cried. One woman stood up just to say thank you. I nodded, steady in heels I once couldn't stand in. June started slowing down that fall, her energy dipping and her naps growing longer. The vet said it was normal, just age, not illness. But it still tugged at me. We took shorter walks, more car rides, and she started sleeping at the foot of my bed instead of by the window. I called Lexie the night I noticed her struggling with stairs. She still got fire, Lexie said, just burning slower. Winter came in fast and sharp, but for once, it didn't feel like a season to survive. I decorated the condo with pine garlands and cinnamon candles, hosted a small party for the Compass Women board, and even let Lexie convince me to hang lights on the balcony. December 15th marked 1 year since the morning Lexie had called me from her cockpit. We didn't make it a big thing, just wine and takeout, and a toast with barely there smiles. But it was enough. You know, Lexie said, twirling her glass, if I hadn't been flying that morning. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You were exactly where you needed to be. She nodded, eyes glinting in the candlelight. Sometimes I wonder if Dad's heart attack wasn't the last time I called with bad news. It wasn't bad, I said. It was the beginning. In January, I received a letter from the Department of Justice, confirmation that Noah's final appeal had been denied. No early release, no reduction, no more courtroom drama. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into the fire, watching it curl and disappear into ash. Lexie watched without speaking, just handed me a fresh mug of tea as I sat back. That night, I slept through until morning. Spring bloomed slowly, like a breath held too long. Tasha, our first scholarship recipient, graduated with honors and invited me to her ceremony. She wore a blue stole and clutched her diploma like it might vanish if she blinked. Afterward, she hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. You didn't just give me money, she whispered. You gave me proof that I could get out. June passed away that summer, quietly in her sleep, curled into her favorite blanket. I found her just before dawn, peaceful and still, and I sat with her until the sun rose. Lexie came over that afternoon, held me while I cried, and helped bury her beneath the pear tree outside the nonprofit's office garden. We placed a small plaque with her name and the words, "Steadfast Companion, Guardian of the Real." Everyone who knew her came to the small ceremony. Everyone brought flowers. It took me a few months to stop reaching for her leash in the mornings. But when I did, it wasn't with pain. It was with a quiet smile and a memory of her wagging tail. I started keeping a journal just for the moments that reminded me I'd survived. A free coffee from a stranger. A client saying, I finally feel safe. A night without bad dreams. The entries weren't dramatic, but they were mine. By fall, I found myself traveling. Conferences, seminars, meetups for financial safety advocates. At one workshop, a woman asked if I'd ever trust anyone again. I answered honestly, yes, but slowly, and only if they know the difference between secrets and privacy. She nodded and said, that's what I needed to hear. We stood in silence for a moment that said more than applause ever could. Lexie got promoted to flight director by November, and we celebrated at the same Italian place our grandmother used to take us to as kids. She ordered 2 glasses of wine, then raised one with a smirk. To the woman who taught a con man that no one escapes a woman with receipts. I laughed, clinked her glass, and added, and to the sister who was my co-pilot through it all. We drank, and it tasted like victory. A week before the new year, I returned to the courthouse, not for a hearing, but to speak at a survivor advocacy day. As I stood in the rotunda, looking up at the painted ceilings and arched windows, I thought of that first day Noah's mask cracked. The kitchen, the phone call, the photograph that tore the lie open. That moment had once felt like the end. Now it was just page 1. I ended my speech with the same words I'd written in my notebook almost a year ago. This wasn't the ending. This was the correction. The room was quiet for a beat before the applause came. As I stepped off the stage, Lexie waited in the aisle, holding my coat. Together, we walked out into the cold, clear afternoon. Thank you for listening to Riley's story. If you're yet to subscribe, please consider doing so before watching another story on the channel.